Welcome to the Chad G. Ortho OT Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Guerrero. I'm an orthopedic occupational therapist, strength and conditioning coach, sports trainer, and I hold over 40 specialty certifications in manual therapy, orthopedics, and sports medicine. On this podcast, we will discuss everything orthopedic therapy, sports medicine, and more. If you're a therapist, health and fitness professional, or someone just wanting to learn more about the orthopedic and sports medicine world, then this is a podcast for you. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Chad G. Ortho OT Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Guerrero. Today we're going to talk about youth single sport specialization. Is that a good idea? No, honestly, we all know that's not a good idea probably, right? I know in my career, over the last 18 years, I've seen a significant spike in youth athlete injuries. And I can't say that it's all related to these, kids really focusing on one sport, year round. There's several things we need to kind of discuss on this and talk about what would be a good idea versus what's absolutely a terrible idea. And this is not just my opinion. Yes, a lot of this does come from my experience. I've been doing this for 18 years as a therapist, and I see a lot of athletes. I work with our high school athletics program here where I'm in my town. And so, I'm around a lot of youth athletes with injuries across the spectrum of different sports. And so, I've had my own travel baseball team. My son was on. I had that from the time they were young. 7, 8 years old, all the way until he got into high school. And one of the differences of the things that we did was we did take off throughout the year. There were off times. And kids that were, when they got to where they could pitch, kids that were pitching more in the fall did not pitch as much in the spring, vice versa. Or if they were pitching, we were very aware of pitch counts and, days of rest. I know so many coaches that we have been around or, you hear about that, want to lie about what their pitch counts are for their pitchers and try to squeeze in some extra pitches, because they got to win the tournament or whatever, or the game. And, honestly, it's not worth it at all. And, shame on a coach that would be willing to push the athlete to the point of injury just so they can, say they come out in first place or second place or whatever and dominated the tournament, whatever sport that is. And the big thing too is you've got, again, kind of going along with that. And I don't want to say that this is all coaches, because I know there's a lot of great coaches out there that do adhere to these recommendations and guidelines by like the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, the American College of Sports Medicine, the National Sports Medicine Institute, the National Athletic Trainers Associations. There's all these organizations, and that's just to name a few, that have some really great guidelines that have been developed by people that are experts in the field, right? That do this all the time, that treat these injuries, that try to prevent these injuries, so it's, there are these guidelines out there and these coaches that do go by these guidelines. And so for those people that are doing that, great job, and continue to do that, because not only, are you developing these athletes, they're enjoying playing because they're not hurt, but then you're also giving them longevity, for when it really matters. Because if we're being honest, nobody cares when your kid was 10 years old that they threw a no-hitter, whatever. It's pointless. Honestly. But like I said, you've got a lot of folks that don't want to adhere to that and want to push the limits, and then the kid ends up hurt. One of the recommendations in a study that was published, I think it was February of this year, it was published by a physician, and basically looked at a study of 1,000, or it was over 1,000 high school athletes. And they found that athletes who specialized in one sport were twice as likely to report a lower extremity injury as compared to those who played multiple sports. And that's not saying that just because you only play one sport, you're going to have, more likely to have these injuries, I guess. But I guess there are some other variables to consider. What do you do in your healing and your time off, and how do you recover, and all those kind of things. But the goal is to try to participate in multiple sports. So just for instance, if you're playing softball, run track, Or if you're in baseball, play football too, or whatever that is, or tennis and something, or soccer, whatever. Because when you participate in sports, especially, and we're going to use baseball and softball, for instance, and some track and field sports that are upper body based, javelin throwing or shot put, things like that, then those are more unilateral. So they're more one-sided sports. So you tend to break down and have more wear and tear because you're using one side of the body so much, and you get overdeveloped on one side and underdeveloped on the other side, and so you just kind of run into some issues there. So that's why it's good to try to pick sports that even are incorporating both sides of the body, and then or something with the lower body. Participate in soccer. You play golf. Go play soccer, because there is a lot of research out there that does support that that kind of cross training or participating in sports that incorporate other areas of the body. You're a more well-rounded athlete. Your movement patterns. You're not just trained to one set of movement patterns. You're using all these movement patterns. That you're learning, you incorporate, and so maybe you end up throwing the ball harder, or you're faster in the 40 or whatever that is, just by participating in these other sports. Another recommendation is you don't want to participate in any single sport more than 8 months out of the year, is what they were kind of, in this study, it kind of cited, and that was kind of a consensus of several organizations. And I posted this a while back. I'm not sure what I put this on in one of my social media platforms, but I put how many hours per week, then age and years. So in other words, if you're 12 years old, then you should participate in 12 hours per week in that sport or in a sport. So 14 hours a week and so on. And then definitely want to have at least 2 days of rest per week, where you don't do any kind of working out, no training, no skills, no nothing, just not doing anything. And how many programs do we know, especially in middle school or even high school, that they're also working out on weekends or things like that. Sometimes they call it like detraining or whatever, but at the end of the day, you're still having to use your body to move the weights and to do the activities, so it's not getting a full amount of rest. And it's also been proven that it's good to have downtime from your sport, because it not only is it allowing for like a physical recovery, but also a mental recovery. I mean, it's so taxing on you mentally. I mean, I know as a coach, like I said, I coached my kid. We played travel baseball for years. I mean, there's a lot of thought process that goes into that, and I know of people that we played with, and other parents I've talked to, the kids just end up by the time they get to high school, when their sports really matter and they can really remember and build some great memories with it, they burn out. They don't care anymore. And I'm not saying it's going to happen with all of them, because I know there's a lot of them that do play all these sports and they love it and the kids love it, and that's great. And I've had parents say, well, if they're doing that, at least they're not doing something unhealthy or something they shouldn't do or whatever. And that's true. I get it. I think it's just, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying you need to make sure that you're really paying attention to these recommendations from professionals of what's the best way to go about it, so that you don't cause burnout with your child, or you don't increase your child's chances of injuries and growth plate injuries and all these different things. Because I know that even like Tommy John surgeries with the UCL, ulnar collateral ligament injuries is went up astronomically, especially in teenage boys. And they said, well, this is going to be a touching a nerve here, because people are going to say, well, it's because they're throwing curveballs too young. Actually, and I heard that when I was growing up. It's like, oh, don't throw a curveball. You're too young for the curveball. Now, there are recommendations as to what age you should be at before you develop certain pitches. And that this has been significantly researched, by a host of people. And Dr. James Andrews at the Andrews Sports Medicine Institute, their whole group, Mike Reinold, a whole bunch of folks have researched this, pretty extensively. And it's not necessarily, it's actually not a curveball, which increases your chances of developing, ulnar collateral ligament damage and requiring Tommy John surgery. It's increased velocity, and increased velocity with the frequency that you're throwing. So kids are developing more, they're throwing harder, earlier on in their age, and then they're throwing more during the week. So it's actually the high velocity and repeated high velocity is what's causing the increase in Tommy John surgery. So, and that's, you can also, like I said, with a curveball, you need to wait until you can control it appropriately, and there is some development there. But not saying that the curveball prematurely, if you don't know how to do it and how to throw it, could hurt your elbow. I'm just saying that if you look at the research, it's not the curveball that's causing the increase in elbow issues. It's high velocity fastballs at a high frequency. So, like I said, I can remember being a kid, and there weren't kids throwing as hard as they are now. There's 15-year-olds that are just absolutely slinging the ball, in, and, so anyway, so just something to consider with that. And make sure that your coach, honestly, and I look at it like this: if your coach is not concerned with doing other things, whether this is a league coach, just a summer league or fall league or whatever, or if this is some sort of travel, weekend competitive team, or whether this is your school, coaches, high school or middle school, if they're not concerned with making sure that you're doing the proper warm-up, the proper, I guess you call it, some sort of detraining or rehab maintenance, just following up with that as best as you can, as best as they can follow up with it, then you really need to ask the coach or, or the program director, athletic director, whoever you go through, like, look, I think we need some education in here. We need something done, that takes care of our athletes. I know sometimes that's a little touchy because you don't want to rock the boat and all that. But at the end of the day, right is right, and making sure that your kid is participating in whatever sport they're participating in. They don't mess up their knee or their shoulder or whatever that is. So one day when they graduate high school and start into either college or the workforce, that they're not hindered because, when they were 14 years old, they were pitched every game, and then they played also during the week, and they played also on the weekend on their travel tournaments or whatever that is, or they, or basketball, running up and down the court, jumping, all the time. Whatever that sport is, just make sure that there is some downtime. So, again, you can go to the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. They've got recommendations on pitch counts and a whole host of other information there. The National Athletic Trainers Association puts that information. National Sports Medicine Institute, the American College of Sports Medicine, the American Baseball Biomechanics Society, which I belong to, puts out some great information. There are places to find it if you just go online and look. You can get information of what you should do or what you shouldn't do, and then when to seek a professional or a healthcare rehab professional, and then kind of go from there. So I hope that helps, guys. And that is just my 2 cents and recommendation on single sport specialization. You're better to participate in more than one sport. Do not participate in a single sport longer than 8 months out of the year, and no more hours per week participation than your age. So 10 years old, 10 hours a week, 12 years old, 12 hours a week, and so on. You need at least 2 days a week to rest where you do nothing related to your sport, because that helps you both physically and mentally. If you have any questions, please send me an email and at chadgorthoot@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please rate me 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. It does help me out a lot. Thanks again, guys, and have a great day. This podcast is brought to you by Guerrero Rehabilitation, setting the bar for rehabilitative and sports medicine care.